areas of economic opportunity, affordable housing, health equity, and critical connections, those critical relationships that make us community and that allow us to manifest our greatest dreams for what an equitable community really looks like. And so this work that the People's Economy Lab is doing, and that many of you are doing on the ground in your own neighborhoods and communities, is at the very core of that. And so I want to thank you again for being here today to share your own experiences and your wisdom, and to share as well the questions and the exploration that we all are doing as we're trying to build together. With that, I would love to pass the mic over to Shiho from the People's Economy Lab, who will then introduce herself and the team, the wonderful team that we have here today with Derek and Njuguna as well. Shiho, you want to take it away?
Thank you, Sarah, for a great introduction. And hello, everyone. Great to see you again, I think. Thank you for joining us today. And thank you also to COO for hosting this workshop. My name is Shiho Fuyuki, and I'm one of the team members at People's Economy Lab. People's Economy Lab is led by and centers the experiences of BIPOC communities here in Seattle. We convene community leaders who are most impacted by the current economy. We workshop transformative ideas and incubate new models and projects. We push the boundaries of what's possible to create local community-centered economies. And the team I have here with me today is Njuguna Gishuru and Derek Gruen, and they will be helping to lead the session today. Njuguna, can I ask you to share our slide deck? And by quickly show of hands, how many of you were in attendance from the last session? Actually, people aren't all on camera, but thank you. We're glad to have you back. Thank you for joining us.
Shio, I'm having some trouble sharing. Can we have Derek? Can I switch the host to you? I'm having some issues sharing.
Let me see. Okay, I do see a screen share here. You want me to go ahead and share?
Yes.
All right. I'll bring it up.
Thank you. And just want to, before I go through the agenda for today's workshop, want to share what very quickly about the last session, our first session, which I believe was at the beginning of this month. It's crazy how time flies so fast. But at the last session, we grounded our participants in the understanding of an economy, a basic understanding of the economy and how we're all actors with the ability to reshape it. We gave examples of ways both locally through our fellows, through Analia Bertoni of Villa Comunitaria and Mark Jones of CORD, who gave examples of what they were doing to innovate and build new economic models. And today we would like to focus our learning on, one, we'll do a real quick overview of, Derek, if you can move to the agenda slide. We'll do an overview of and a recap of what we learned in our first workshop. And then we'll also do an activity, an introductory activity of how do we create a vision, or how can we collectively create a vision for a people's economy in Seattle. So we'll do an activity together. We'll introduce some activities that we have been doing at People's Economy Lab toward building a new economy in Washington State. And then we'll dive into 3 rounds of breakout sessions. And what we hope to do is to ask for volunteers from the audience to share your project with us. And we would love to help facilitate how your project, how we can apply new economy concepts in your project. And we'll go through some activities with that, and we'll do 3 rounds of that. So hopefully we'll get some volunteers for that. We'll come back as a whole group and do reflections, and then we'll discuss a wrap up and next steps. And so our goal today is really to apply what we learned from our first session into the work that you're all already doing in our community right now. And in full transparency, we don't have all the answers. There's not really a playbook for the work that we're doing. We're leaning into and centering the experiences of our community. we're inspired by what's happening locally, and we learn and follow what's going on nationally and workshop ways to see what makes the most sense for our community. So we're learning as we go, and we want to thank you for being a part of this process. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Njuguna, who will give us a quick recap of our first workshop.
Thank you, Shiho. Next slide, please. And so at our last session, we started by talking about what the economy is, and really started by breaking down the word economy to the management of home, and revisiting the fact that the economy, although we view it as something highly complex, is really just our management of our home as a planet in terms of its resources and activities. Then we talked about the pillars of the economy. Those pillars include, right, resources plus work. That is really what the economy is: resources plus work to achieve a specific purpose. And that economy is governed and grows out of an overall worldview, and then is supported by a governance system. Those are the pillars of the economy. Next slide. Then we identified what the pillars of our current economy are. We call this the extractive economy. That economy operates based on extraction of natural resources and a dig, burn, dump process. That economy uses the exploitation of labor and adds that to resources to achieve its ultimate purpose, which is, in this current economy, the enclosure of wealth and power. This economy grows out of a worldview of white supremacy, patriarchy, consumerism, and a colonial mindset. Those are sort of the worldviews that it's based in. And then the governance system is a system of militarism that it takes to enforce and maintain this system of extraction and exploitation for the purpose of enclosing wealth and power. So we really defined the extractive economy as our starting point in our last session. Next slide. Then we talked about the regenerative economy, or the people's economy, which seeks a different purpose than the last economy, a purpose that is ecological and social well-being for everybody in the world. And with that as a new purpose, we have a new and more living economy, a people's economy. That focuses on a system of regeneration in terms of resources rather than extraction, and a system of cooperation in terms of labor to achieve that ultimate purpose. The worldview that governs this system is a worldview of sacredness and caring in replacement of the previous worldviews. And the governance system is really deep democracy, and the people themselves on the front lines being the decision makers and the power brokers in this system. Next slide. And so when we talk about the people's economy, as Shiho mentioned, this is not something for which somebody has all the answers or for which there's a playbook. There are a lot of different terms that are being used, including solidarity economy, new economy, pluralist economy, and many others. But really, some of the common themes or threads in all of those economies that are described are, transformative justice as an element of this new economy. That community control rather than monopoly is a characteristic of this economy. That this economy centers the worker owner and not the boss over the worker. That things like community land trusts appear in this economy, community ownership of land rather than a single capitalist owning land. Credit unions are what we see in these type of frameworks rather than banks, collective ownership. We see systems that are participatory rather than representative, where folks are deeply engaged. And we see tenants unions as opposed to landlords. These are just some of the characteristics we see in this vision of a new economy or a people's economy. Next slide. And so the Just Transition framework is a strategic framework for transitioning from an extractive economy to a living economy. And that's the framework that the people's economy uses and that we touched on in the first session. This is a process of navigating contradictions. And so that's why we've said that there's no playbook to this. And this is sort of a messy and a difficult process, but a process that is necessary to move from where we are in the extractive economy to the living economy. So we want you to think about this whole process as a process of navigating contradictions, those contradictions in your own work and those contradictions in this system. Next slide. And so as we talk about this just transition, there are specific strategies in the just transition framework to get to the living economy. That involves stopping the bad from the extractive economy and building the new for the peoples of the living economy. It involves divesting from the old power systems of the extractive economy and investing in our power in the new or peoples or living economy. And so in our work, we focus on building the new, and the first session was focused on that specific area of the just transition framework. Next slide. And so in this just transition and in that space of building the new and sort of divesting from that extractive world to this new world, there are multiple frameworks and different roles in that world. And so one of the things we did in last session was to identify the different roles in order for folks on this call and others to identify where you place yourself in that transition framework. There are those that are the protectors who are sort of hospicing the old economy for a transition into the new. And you'll see them identified there on your screen. And then there are also those trailblazers who are building new models and doing sort of that difficult work of building those new models into sustainability. And then there are also others that are illuminators, illuminating this work and spreading the message of what it's doing. And so we touched on some of those roles. Again, they're not all specifically or clearly defined, but they are defined to a certain degree. And we want to give you the information you need to identify where you may fit there. Next slide. And so in this world of a just transition, we see a bunch of different economies of practice that we wanted to highlight for you as examples of folks doing the just transition work. We see work in areas such as production and reproduction that include worker co-ops, care work, community gardens. In distribution and exchange, we see work around fair trade, tool share, gift economy, new ways of exchanging resources. In terms of consumption, we're seeing community land trusts, collective ownership and consumption, food cooperatives, consuming together, resident-owned communities, owning together. In terms of finance, we're seeing peer lending, people lending to their peers, community loan funds, similar to SUSUs and other cultural institutions, direct public offerings and things that reflect things more in the conventional system. And there are governance, we're seeing participatory budgeting in our own city and other communities. We're seeing community governance, and we're seeing progressive taxation. These are some of the economies of practice in this new economy that we're seeing increasingly. Next slide. And so we also got a lot of your feedback on what you're seeing out there. And when we asked you about what elements of the people's economy you're working towards, you gave us a lot of great responses in terms such as community-centered housing, shifting resources, group wellness, self-sufficiency, and redistribution. Next slide. We also asked about the values and practices you see coming through from these projects towards the people's economy. You told us that you see equity, you see empowerment, you see collaboration, you see ownership, you see caring, you see cooperation, and you see targeted universalism. Some very powerful themes. Next slide. And we asked you, what are your next steps towards a people's economy? You told us that it's relationship building. It is building across silos. We see first access. We see community as the biggest reflection in next steps, creating community. And then continue cultivating shared language. Next slide. And so overall, some of the key defining characteristics of a people's economy and of this shift are that decision-making and ownership of production, consumption, and distribution is being shifted to the hands of workers and communities rooted in place. That is the vision we're working towards. And that the purpose and scale of production and consumption, the sort of the goal and purpose is to meet the needs of those people in place. All right, next slide. And so that's the end of the wrap up or the review of the last session. Next, I'll pass it on to get into our first activity.
Thank you, Njuguna, for a great overview. I'd like to dive into this first activity, and I just chatted in a link for a shared slide and would like everyone to open that link up and go to slide 2. And let me try and share this slide. So this is what you should be seeing, and let us know if anybody's having issues with the technology or the link. What we would like to ask all of you to do is to think about what vision of a solidarity economy do you have for our community? What does it look like? What does it feel like? What does it sound like? And I'm going to give everybody 2 minutes. And I'm going to ask you to first think about it, reflect on it. And then I'm going to ask you to grab one sticky. There's nothing different about the colors. So you can just click on a sticky and you should be able to type. And would love for you to share, what does that vision look like for you? What does it sound like for you? What does that feel like? And would love to capture this on this board, and we'll ask for a couple of volunteers to share out. So with that, I'm going to give you 2 minutes to think about that. Again, if anyone's having issues with the technology, please let us know in the chat. I might add in one thing. When I say community, let's think about the Seattle community or the greater Seattle community. Feel free to take more than one sticky if you need to. This is really great. I'm seeing lots of fun answers. Smells like home cooked food. Yes. Looks like access to fresh produce. Feels like healthy resources. Sounds like a community market. Looks like everyone can access what they need to thrive. Feels like abundance, comfort, relief, a hug. Sounds like laughter, joy, friendly greetings, music. Everyone's basic needs are taken care of. A sense of abundance, not scarcity. Feels renewable, sustainable, people over profit, open source, collective decisions, mindful use of resources, shared vision. This is awesome. A creative economy in Rainier Valley that honors, celebrates, and preserves arts and culture. Wonderful. Would anyone like to share a little bit more about their response? And no pressure.
I could.
So, hi there. Can you introduce yourself and then share with us what you wrote?
Yes, thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Afua Kuyate, and I'm with Adefua Cultural Education Workshop. We've been around for a long time in Seattle. This is our 36th year, and our arts and culture has always been very segregated in Seattle, yet it's been celebrated at, events, but in Rainier Valley, where we're the most diverse ethnic, composition of people, in arts and culture. So when we look for cultural work, for arts and cultural jobs, it's usually pertain to like going into the schools or going into downtown Seattle, right? Or the Seattle Center. And we want to be able to bring that economy right where we live in Rainier Valley. So Adefua is really looking at trying to figure out, along with becoming a creative district for the state of Washington, how do we really work together as the community to really bring those local collaborations into dollars. So we're just trying to figure it out.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. And I might ask you to volunteer later in our small group breakout so we can work through some of those things together.
Yeah, I have to teach a class in about
okay.
45 minutes.
Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
I'd like to go to the next question, and that's slide 3. How do you hold the North Star in your work against pressures of extractive economy? I think this is really about, pressures in terms of, yes, everything that contributes to an extractive economy, but also priorities and limitation of time and capacity and resources that are available to us. So how do you hold on to that North Star? And I'll give you 2 minutes again to sort of think and respond.
Well, let me write.
We're on slide 3.
Won't let me click in.
Maybe try double clicking.
Yeah, I'm like triple clicking.
If you want to chat in your question, I can populate it for you.
Okay.
Sorry, not question, your response.
Thank you.
Trust in your vision. Beautiful. Center relationships. Not be afraid to say no to partnerships or opportunities that don't feel right. Yes, absolutely. Listen closely to the voices of participants and community leaders. Rooting in relationship building. Continue to center people and their well-being in the decisions we make at an organizational level. Be very wary of tokenization. Great responses. Thank you. Passing on heritage, being accountable for legacy, seeing the need within the community. Be patient. Yes, absolutely. Breathe and get outside. Yes. This week or in last week. Slow down. Low-hanging fruit is not always the best path to success. Absolutely. Would anyone like to share a bit more of what you wrote here? And no pressure. So we're going to come back to this in the small group breakout session also.
I'm happy to chime in just for a moment. I think from what we've seen from experience.
Yourself?
Sure, sorry. I'm David Sylvian with the Ready Beach Action Coalition. And I think from experience, what we've learned over time is that, we just have to sometimes be difficult and not necessarily kind of go along with what others' expectations of our work need to be, just so that maybe we are satisfying other people, partners, institutions, interest, but actually stick to our vision and make sure that we hold that course. There are plenty of ways to take shortcuts, but not necessarily in a way that will be reflective of what we're trying to achieve. And I think that takes courage, but it all pays off in the end.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that resonates with maybe all of us on this call. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for participating in our first activity. I'm going to pass it on to Derek, who will walk us through some of the work that we have been doing to build a new economy here in Washington State. And then we'll come back again into more activities.
Shiho. So let me bring up the slides once more. And I just want to briefly mention a project that the People's Economy Lab, which was a part of, called New Economy Washington, and which we continue to help breathe life into. And what that was is a one-year process with a number of organizations that took time to ask our communities about kind of what are the key aspects we need to be thinking about and working towards to build this larger vision of an economy that moves us beyond the extractive economy. And the process led to kind of identification of a few core principles like equity, like pursuing transformative change, even when it's difficult, as was just mentioned, and about a regenerative economy that actually builds back life into the center of our economy, and also identified some core conditions around understanding the history of how we got here and actually defining and making sure we really believe in our own vision moving forward, and identify any doubts that we prioritize equity, particularly racial equity, that we start with organizing and are engaging our base, the core of who needs change, that we organize across silos outside, of just Seattle, and build and sustain this longer term agenda through the ups and downs and changes in weather in terms of political environment or economic environment. And finally, that we innovate and experiment and try new things and not be held to account for taking risks that are trying and doing things differently than they've historically done before. So we just wanted to bring this up as another point of contact and in a framework for which we hope that can provide a starting base for this big movement push that we will need to actually transform our economy. So in that work, we identified a few core strategies of building strong backbones for organizing, for building that bigger we of who sees themselves in this work and working together, for changing the story of our economy and what our understanding is and our ability to actually empower ourselves to take action on the economy, from fundamentally moving money and shifting resources, from building the new, which is the focus of our conversation today, and the models that aren't based in extractive practices, and then changing the rules, the policies and the systems that actually maintain the extractive economy. And so we've been working to build more connections across stakeholders, sometimes less traditional networks of things like community businesses, with philanthropy, workers and community-based organizations, donors, and educating their networks with anchor institutions like governments or hospitals and colleges, to try to build enough stakeholder momentum and enough shared alignment in language and understanding of our economy to actually build that momentum that we'll need to get over the inertia of and the pull of the extractive economy that we're in. And that's that process of navigating the contradictions that Njuguna mentioned, as we're always kind of pulled back towards status quo. And then I'll hand it to Shiho. Briefly, I'll just say that part of this work has been supporting that experimentation and innovation from community-based leaders like yourselves. These are a group of community leaders that are being supported by the New Economy Washington Frontline Fellowship and our peer learning cohort, who are going through a process of receiving funding that came through COO to support these building new economic models, whether it's in a space of arts, of real estate, of food systems, and more, to practice these new models and help show and demonstrate what can happen when we invest in community-led solutions that are allowed to experiment and innovate. So there's a year-long process here that we hope to replicate in future years and have additional participants on. So keep a lookout for that. And then I'll hand it back to Shiho to talk about how we're actually looking at this ecosystem as not just single points of making change, but as a network.
Thanks, Derek. And as you can see, there's a highlighted pink complexity warning to this visual of a just transition mapping project that People's Economy Lab is working on. One of the things that we really wanted to do through this particular project was to understand the wicked problem as an extractive economy and map this problem from the perspective of different stakeholders. And in our case, we asked our community economic leaders that you see some of the names listed there to participate in this session, or it's a series of sessions. And in order to get a fuller picture of the problem within the problems that we are existing in, but not just to focus on the extractive economy and the problems, but more to focus on how do we get from this extractive economy toward a regenerative and living economy. And so we provided a mapped landscape of actors, relationships, and expertise around the leverage points identified. And those are the green dots. They represent organizations, projects. Some of your orgs may be listed here also. And what we did was we wanted to see, how do you identify, where do we make an ecology of intervention in the system for the most systemic change? So not thinking about just designing one-off solutions, but how can solutions support each other to match the nested problems within a wicked problem? And then what are some theories of change, overarching theories of change that we can derive from looking at this ecology? And so it's a very complex map, as you can see it here, but extractive economy is also very complex. And so we have a lot of things going against us, and we're doing our part as a community to really figure out how do we fight this together. And this map is really a tool to organize and engage actors into alignment and participation and begin to create a shared narrative. We hope to build a list, or this is a start to a list to support advocacy, matchmaking, collaborative projects. And then we're also building participatory data together here through this mapping project. And this doesn't necessarily belong to us. We would like everyone to be able to access this and use the data that we're collecting so that we can collectively share the narrative from the community's perspective. This is a pilot map, and we're actually wrapping up this weekend, and we hope to share more about it in the future. So with that, we're going to transition into activity number 2, which is a breakout. And oh yes, Afua.
Oh, thank you. I was going to ask, how could we receive the information from the data mapping? Because that's really important information that we all struggle with being able to figure out how to receive it.
Yeah, that's a good question. So we're wrapping up the mapping, or the pilot mapping project this weekend, and then we're working with our consultant Kamal Patel and Dimeji to sort of help us summarize what happened. It's, we had 5 sessions to get to this map.
I bet.
It's very, very deep.
Mhm.
So we would love to begin to share out the results and, not just the data in the map, but also the stories that come along the map. And so we hope to be able to share that out through convenings and other workshops in the future. But if you are interested in participating in some of that, would love to have your contact information, and then we can invite you to a share out session.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So would like to dive into a breakout session, and what we hope to do is to walk through with you, and we're going to ask for a volunteer in the small group to share your story about your project. What are you working on toward a solidarity economy? And we have some guided questions that we'd like to walk through with you, and go through your project and identify where are there elements of a new economy, and just have a discussion together. And we'll do 20 minutes per project, and we hope to, actually, we might not have time. Let's maybe focus on 2 for now, and then we'll see. Yeah, we would like to break out into a small group, ask for a volunteer to share your story, and then we'll go through an exercise together to see how your project fits into the solidarity economy framework. Quick huddle, Derek and Njuguna, with a smaller number of folks on the call. Should we do 2 groups or should we do 3? 2 groups? Okay. So if Sarah and Caroline, if that's okay, if we can do 2 small groups, and then we could do a random breakout.
And Shiho, Njuguna, and Derek, how would you like to be, which group would you like to be in? Do 2 of you want to be together?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Any 2? Okay,
Sure.
great. Thank you, Caroline. We'll get us all into groups. Thank you all.
All right. I was trying to move people around. I didn't see, did Derek or Njuguna say who preferred to be together?
Doesn't matter to them.
Okay,
Yes.
cool.
Thank you. Can we pause the recording, or is it already paused?
What did you learn? Those are my questions for you, and it's really an open discussion. And Njuguna, maybe if you want to kick us off, if you were sort of going through some learnings in your previous small group.
Yes. I guess I'll start with touching on our last group. Thank you, Maggie Rickman, for your contribution and talking to us about the Food Access Aggregation Community Team. In our discussion, we talked about this independent South King County local food movement that is building right now, serving low-income residents of South King County, small and mid-sized farmers, BIPOC communities, immigrants, and refugees, and talked about how they're doing this work, trying to do this work in a context that is different from the nonprofit industrial complex in the extractive economy, and how their work has a focus on farmer leadership and on transferring power and land, power, and decision-making to local farmers from immigrant and refugee communities and other communities locally, and are working to address some of the barriers and maybe some of the inequities we see in some of the structures locally by, say, relying on farmer leadership, being clear that they do not have all the answers, but that they are relying on community for the answers, and being patient. Meg really described being patient with community and spending the time that it takes to build the decision-making kind of clarity and power in community, and really staying centered in that So we found that to be a really powerful discussion. I ended up asking Maggie a question at the end, because I saw a really big difference in the way they function from the way traditional cooperatives can function. And if Maggie, if I'm saying this wrong, you can definitely jump in. But one example she had was that if they're incubating farmers, a normal incubator may just define a market and buy the product from the farmers and say, we'll sell it to Amazon or whoever. They work directly with the farmers to help them define a market for themselves, to build markets with those farmers, and then to together help those farmers sell their products. And so I recognize that as a more difficult process, but something that really resonates with me in terms of, because it is building the new, and it's a difficult process. So she really gave us a lot of input about how they're working with farmers to do that, and gave me some feedback on her approach to that. And I found that really valuable because it's reflective of some of the work we do as well.
Great, thank you, Njuguna. That was a great summary of the conversation. I'm wondering, Maggie, do you want to add anything? Was this conversation helpful to you as you think about how to move forward with your work?
Yes, and I'll say that even something you said in the first session, I know the term circular economy, but I just had never applied it to this work. So thanks for thanks for that. Sometimes having the right language and the right words to explain the process is really helpful. So I think these spaces are so great for that as well. I think that that was a great wrap up. I will also say that Njuguna's mom is actually a member of our project, so that's a great small world. One of our leaders. So shout out to Jambi. And I will also add that I do not dislike incubators. I just want to make that clear. I think that that kind of model works really well for certain people, and it has not worked well in South King County, especially with immigrant and refugee farmers in the past. So we're paving a different way. I think that works, and identifying that things are going to work well for some people and not necessarily for others. So there are some really successful farming incubator programs even in the Pacific Northwest that I think fit even well into this framework, but they tend to serve different populations or needs and address different barriers than what we're focused on.
Great. Thank you, Maggie. Anyone else? What did you hear? What did you learn? Was this process helpful? Whether you shared your project or you were a listener or discussion contributor. Would love to hear any reflections.
I loved actually hearing a lot about, or a little about Vincent's project. Just briefly, I think I'm probably not going to do it justice. So Vincent, please hop in if I'm completely massacring your project, but it's kind of a way to kind of a kind of low tech, but also using technology way to transfer stories and create connectivity between villages in Africa and the diaspora here in the US, and how to kind of subvert and go around kind of Facebook and some of the other tech systems that we normally use to share stories, so that it can be a more accessible way, and it can be controlled, kind of those stories can be controlled by the communities themselves who are reporting out. And I just thought that was a very kind of, just a concept that I had not even thought about, and kind of just thinking about, I also am a part of a diaspora, how nice it would have been to feel connected back home to communities where my parents grew up, and hearing their stories and hearing kind of, even if it wasn't a news story, hearing kind of keeping that connection to culture and heritage, and would have been really nice. So I think that is a very admirable project to be working on. And I really liked that it was decentralized. I really liked that it was focused on communities owning the entire process and deciding what gets shared. And so yeah, Vincent can probably share more, but I just wanted to uplift that project because it was quite interesting.
Thank you, Sandhya. Vincent, would love to hear from you.
Well, I think she has summarized it pretty well. It's a concept of being, I started about over a year ago, and it was just a concept meant on bridging the digital divide. And so thinking of the context of Africa where access to broadband is a luxury. And so we wanted to segue into the mobile network where, at least there's a high penetration of access. So instead of using an internet-based platform, we just segue into the regular audio telephone line. So content creators can upload the information on the system, share it via text messages, QR codes. And so that was the entire concept of the project.
Yeah, that's really great that, communities designing that entire process with your lead. So thank you for sharing about that.
You're welcome.
Any other reflections? I really wish that David and Maggie, we could have done your project together in these small groups, because I know RBAC has been also working in the food ecosystem and supporting farmers and youth to engage in the food economy. And so that, I'm really sorry we ran out of time to be able to do that. But really great work that all of y'all are doing. And thank you for spending this time with us to talk about it and share about it with us. I'm going to transition us from reflection to further engagement, and then wrap up and reflection. We have a couple of more activities before we let you go, but we might be able to release you a little bit earlier since we didn't take a break in the last hour and a half. So I'm going to transition to Njuguna, who's going to help us wrap up.
All right, thank you, Shiho. And so as a wrap up, we just want to give you a few takeaways of some of the People's Economy Lab opportunities that are open to you. We would like to let you know that we want you to join our network, and we want you to do this by, please put your full name in the chat with your email and organization. We'll have access to that, and we'll put you on our list so that you can continue to learn about what the People's Economy Lab is doing, so we can share information with you about how the local just transition movement is progressing. There are also opportunities to collaborate with us and to support People's Economy Lab projects. Currently, we are supporting 5 fellows who are doing amazing work building new economic models that are empowering communities of color. And we want to offer you the opportunity to support those fellows with technical assistance, collaboration, or any form of engagement that you're interested in. We are also have a steering committee of community organization, of leaders of local BIPOC community organizations, who we are also serving, and want to offer you the opportunity to access those organizations and opportunities to help them build new solutions and a new economy locally. By staying a part of our network, you can stay connected and hear about what's going on and learn about other learning opportunities that we'll be participating in. We also want to talk to you about your work and how you're making your particular transition in your work. Similarly to what we did today, we want to know about the contradictions that you're navigating out there and the opportunities and threats to you achieving your goal of getting to that living economy, people's economy. And so if you're interested in talking to us about that, if there's something you heard that is still spinning in your mind, we'd like you to reach out to us, and we'll make our contact information available to you. And we want to continue to learn together. So we want to continue to access and create opportunities like this with communities of opportunity and other local government entities and other large stakeholders. And we also want to build cooperation and collaboration so we can start to help to build out those elements of the new economy. And so again, those are the opportunities that are currently available. If any of those things are of interest to you, please feel free to reach out to us. Again, please put your full name with your email and your organization and any other relevant information you'd like us to know in the chat, and we will use that information to reach out to you. And so with that, I think toss it back to Shiho for one more activity.
Thank you, Njuguna. And again, I want to thank everyone for participating. As we wrap up, would love to go back to this shared slide again. Hopefully you still have the link. What is one idea from today that you are taking away from your work or taking for your work? And would love to ask you again to take a sticky and add that in. Oh, and thank you, Caroline, for sharing the link again. Couple of things coming in. Concept of increasing alignment with the just transition movement as a framework. How can we leverage the ecosystem of players in this space to ensure communities are truly owning what gets funded and the attention? Making sure funders work from an equitable lens. Awesome. Yeah, we didn't talk a lot about how do we engage funders in this discussion, but I think that's a really important piece about how do we make sure that they too are aware of some of the activities and even just the just transition framework, and how do we move from an extractive economy toward a living and a people's economy. So maybe a future conversation on that. And last but not least, what is something that you need additional support on? This could be additional resources, reading materials, a connection perhaps. Would love to hear what that might look like for you. Case studies. Or maybe it's connecting to a peer or someone from the circle that you met today, based on the stories that they've shared about their project.
Please don't be shy. If you have a wish list, or don't hesitate.
Information to bring back to the rest of the collective, maybe a guest speaker from your group. Would love to hear more. What collective is this?
It's me with fact.
Okay.
Well, we have a 7 organizations in our team. So the more people who can get the we couldn't all be here today. So the more people who can get the, get the word out, the better.
And how powerful that Njuguna's mom is a part of your group. Maybe Njuguna, you might be interested in this. Continuing to create more space for these conversations, absolutely. Some sort of website database of all these great projects. Great suggestion. We have a long list of a Google Doc of a variety of projects who are, across the country, not just in Seattle, if that's something that anybody wants to see. Community Investment Trust also has a very good spreadsheet of projects that are working in this space of innovative economic models, whether it's about affordable housing, economic development, supporting small businesses. They have a spreadsheet that captures some of that. Ways to engage King County staff into this work. Awesome. That would be great. Well, that is a wrap for our session today. Thank you everyone for joining us. And Sarah, I'm going to pass it back over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Shiho. As we head into the last little bit here, I actually wanted to do a very quick poll. Caroline, if you would mind bringing up the poll question. It's simply to ask whether any of you are interested in having more small group kind of work sessions and conversations like we're having today, where we're really diving into the the real experiences and kind of the nitty-gritty details of what it is that you're doing with each other. Afua, who had to leave the workshop a little bit early because she had to teach, mentioned that she was really interested in being able to hear more about the work that's happening in community, because while our work may be different, we all are in community with each other, right? And so there is an opportunity potentially for COO to partner with the People's Economy Lab to host more small group, generative discussions like these, where perhaps things like sharing more case studies, creating more space for conversations like this, talking about funder alignment, talking about leveraging the ecosystem of the different players can be a part of that. And so I would love it if folks would respond so that we have a sense if you're interested. And then with that, just some logistics. After the workshop in the next day or two, we will send out the recording so that you're able to revisit this conversation. We'll send out the PowerPoint and any other materials that Njuguna and Derek and Shiho think might be helpful to you. We'll also be sending out a very brief evaluation survey that we would deeply appreciate you to fill out, because it allows us to offer workshops like these and make sure that we keep on improving them so that we meet community needs and priorities. Outside of that, I think that I just want to thank you all for making the time and space and energy to be here today. I know that this has been a big week in a lot of ways, a very emotional week in the midst of what seems like a relentless barrage of emotional weeks and months and year and a half. And so, I think that it is what you are doing. It is a community that we build together. It is how we learn from one another that brings around not only hope, but the world that we know we can build. And so thank you for everything that you're doing. Thank you for everything that you bring. Thank you to Njuguna and Derek and Shiho for your brilliance and the grace with which you led this conversation today. I look forward to seeing you all again soon. If there are any questions, always feel free to reach out to myself or Caroline from COO or any of the trainers who are on this call. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.